Welcome to this explainer. I am so glad you're here today because we're unpacking something genuinely fascinating. We're going to explore exactly how grassroots music movements, from 1970s bootleg tape traders sneaking equipment into concert halls all the way to modern open-air techno ravers, challenge, bypass, and eventually completely reshape formal, rigid institutions. This isn't just about the music itself. It's this sprawling global story of human ingenuity and our deep-seated desire for authentic connection. So, let's dive right in.
To kick things off, let's pose a bit of a riddle. What do 1970s opera fans and modern Viennese ravers actually have in common? I mean, on the surface, they seem like they live in entirely different universes, right? You've got pearl-clutching theatergoers on one hand and bass-pounding night owls on the other. But as you'll see, both of these groups creatively use participatory music to bypass official limitations and carve out their very own cultural spaces.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover music as democratic participation, check out the entrepreneurial tapists, explore the value of authenticity, talk about reclaiming Vienna's public spaces, and finally look at what happens when the grassroots actually becomes official. All right, Section 1, Music as Democratic Participation. Let's establish exactly how communities use music to claim their agency. To really ground this, let's look at a historic moment in Austria, anchored by researchers Kolbel and Trumpy. Picture this, a massive governmental crisis has just sparked widespread public protests in Vienna. The atmosphere is super tense, the stakes are high, and the soundtrack to all this political upheaval, it's the 1999 synthetic pop song We're Going to Ibiza by the Venga Boys. Literally. Why? Well, because the crisis stemmed from a scandal famously dubbed Ibizagate, where politicians were caught on a hidden camera on the island of Ibiza. Thousands of citizens gathered in front of government buildings, singing and dancing to this bouncy pop track to voice their outrage. The sheer absurdity of it is brilliant. It illustrates our first core concept perfectly. Music, even incredibly cheesy pop music, can be repurposed as a powerful democratic force, allowing everyday people to participate in political critique from the bottom up.
Moving right along to Section 2, the entrepreneurial tapists. Let's step back in time to the Cold War to see this grassroots participation in action.
In the Soviet Union during the 1960s and 70s, the state heavily controlled the cultural industries. Everything was vetted, everything was censored. So how did music listeners respond to those intense formal limitations? They just created their own parallel system. They built a trusted network called Magnet Dizidad, which literally translates to tape publishing. Everyday citizens became these entrepreneurial tapists, using reel-to-reel recorders to capture and share unofficial live recordings, like the deeply poetic and often subversive guitar poetry. And we have to remember the sheer risk involved here. Defying the Soviet State Musicians Union wasn't just copyright infringement, it was a potentially dangerous political act. Yet people willingly built these underground networks to circulate art entirely outside the official gaze.
Now let's flip over to a completely different political system. Over in the US and Europe, opera fans were doing the exact same thing. Commercial recording companies held these exclusive contracts, meaning they dictated who got to record with whom, which often prevented huge stars from ever performing together on an official album. So fans simply became pirates. Posh, opera-loving citizens basically turned into underground espionage agents. They would literally smuggle bulky reel-to-reel tape recorders into venues like the Metropolitan Opera, hidden inside briefcases. They were running microphones up their raincoat sleeves and sitting dead still for hours just to capture unapproved live performances of their absolute favorite singers.
So here's why this comparison is absolutely crucial. Whether it was Soviet citizens bypassing an authoritarian state, or American opera fans bypassing the corporate monopolies of recording companies, both groups weaponized the exact same technology to build trusted underground networks. They shared this profound desire to define their own musical culture. It really just goes to show that human ingenuity and the drive for participatory music distribution can't be contained, not by an iron curtain, and definitely not by corporate red tape.
That brings us to Section 3, the value of authenticity. Why go through all the trouble, and sometimes extreme legal risk, of smuggling a tape recorder into a venue?
Well, the answer lies in the craving for something real. These tapists desperately wanted the authentic with all its flaws. They actively rejected over-engineered commercial tracks that were, as they put it, note-perfect but sterile.
You say, once magnetic tape editing hit official studios, commercial producers started playing God. They could splice tape together, taking a high note from Tuesday's take and mixing it with a melody from Thursday's, effectively creating these impossible Frankenstein-like perfect performances where every single human mistake was magically erased. But the underground collectors, they hated that. They deeply valued the raw thrill, the high-stakes risk, and the unique energy of a live performance that simply couldn't be manufactured in a sterile studio.
Because of this insatiable craving for authenticity, these pirate networks championed very specific types of artists. They worshipped singing actresses like Maria Callas and the Turkish soprano Leyla Gincher. Gincher, for instance, wasn't just a singer, she was a total force of nature. She was known for prowling the stage like a caged animal, throwing her entire being into these intensely dramatic, terrifyingly visceral performances. Commercial companies largely neglected her because she wasn't playing it safe. But to the tapists, her uninhibited, sometimes flawed, wildly passionate voice was incredibly satisfying. They were actively preserving the true, raw art that the formal industry deemed just way too risky or unpolished to sell.
All right, fast forward to today with Section 4, Reclaiming Vienna's Public Spaces. Let's see how this exact same impulse to bypass commercial structures for something real plays out in our physical cities.
Let's look at the modern techno scene. There's this old 1990s myth that electronic dance music is just apolitical partying, just a bunch of kids in a warehouse. But researchers today point out that self-organized, non-commercial rave cultures are inherently a form of profound social criticism. Think about the highly industrialized cities we live in today. Almost every single square foot of urban space is designed to extract money from you. Every venue has a cover charge, overpriced drinks, and a barrage of marketing. By creating spaces that are completely free from the pressure to consume, where the production and marketing are entirely self-determined by the youth themselves, these collectives are actively challenging those established commercial structures. Reclaiming a patch of grass just to exist and dance without buying anything is in itself a remarkably radical act. And this brilliantly illustrates how a modern underground movement actually gains real momentum. If we track Vienna's Free Spaces project, documented by the Vienna Club Commission, the speed of this evolution is honestly staggering. It kicked off in 2022 as a pure grassroots demand, a petition gathering nearly 900 signatures for legal, unbureaucratic, open-air raves. By 2023, that piece of paper manifested into actual physical infrastructure, with 2 test events on the Donauinsel. Then, in 2024, it exploded to 5 fully realized events organized by 9 different collectives. In just a couple of years, you can see the incredibly rapid, bottom-up growth of a community successfully demanding their own non-commercial space.
Which leads us to our final section, Section 5, when grassroots becomes official. What actually happens when formal institutions realize the underground just isn't going away?
After the 2024 rave season, the Vienna Club Commission held focus groups to look at the lessons learned. And the core realization was that, yeah, the events happened, but the independent youth collectives were carrying a crushing weight of financial and bureaucratic risk. Imagine trying to throw a free party while navigating this absolute labyrinth of city permits, insurance liabilities, and infrastructure costs. It was a heavy stone of bureaucracy weighing them down. Without support, this vibrant, self-organized culture just wasn't sustainable as a best practice. The formal system finally realized it was inadvertently crushing the very grassroots culture it was trying to permit.
So here's where it gets really interesting. In 2025, the city of Vienna actually stepped in to structurally support the underground. And there's a pretty funny irony here, right? This rebel, anti-establishment techno movement succeeded so well that the official city government is now dutifully footing their bills. The cultural department is providing 3,000 euros of funding per event. The city's waste management is delivering mobile toilets, taking a huge, unglamorous financial burden off the collectives. The city is funding their electricity access through making spaces, and even relaxing the regulations for operating hours and volume limits. The rigid, official system completely reshaped itself to legally accommodate and sustain the raw participatory culture that had originally organized entirely outside of it.
From opera pirates smuggling tape recorders in their sleeves to youth collectives successfully negotiating for municipal toilets and techno spaces in Vienna, the drive is completely identical. People fundamentally want to participate in culture, not just passively consume whatever formal institutions hand them. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. Where do you see informal, participatory culture bypassing the rules and shaping the institutions in your own city or media today? Thanks so much for joining me, and keep looking for the underground.